Welcome to this specialized training module on governance and management of IT, with a specific deep dive into data governance and data classification. In this session, we will move beyond general IT management to focus on the organization's most valuable non-human asset, its data. We will explore how to establish a governance framework that ensures data is accurate, secure, and legally compliant. Let's get started. Let's begin by defining our terms. Data governance is often confused with data management, but they are distinct. Governance is the oversight function. It is about setting the direction, prioritizing decisions, and ensuring that data usage aligns with the organization's strategic objectives. Think of governance as the rules of the road set by senior management. By contrast, data management is the actual execution driving the car, if you will. It involves the technical implementation of those rules through processes like storage and backup. Why do we need this distinction? Because without governance, management has no direction. Effective governance protects intellectual property and ensures privacy by establishing clear policies and standards. This diagram illustrates the hierarchy of authority. It starts at the top with the board and senior management, who set the overall strategy. This FLWS into the data governance function, highlighted here, which defines the policies and direction. Governance then directs data management. Notice how data management splits into execution branches. IT operations, handling the technical side, and business processes, handling the usage side. Governance sits above the fray, directing the traffic. To govern data, you must understand its life cycle. You cannot govern what you don't track. The life cycle begins with planning. Before we even collect data, we must decide its value and how long we will keep it. Next is design, where we build the secure structures to hold it. Then comes build or acquire, where the data actually enters our systems. The longest phase is operations, where data is actively used and shared. Finally, and critically for auditors, is disposal. We must ensure data is securely destroyed or archived when it reaches the end of its retention period. Governance must be applied at every single one of these stages. Here we see the data lifecycle as a continuous flow. It starts with planning. If we fail to plan, the downstream phases suffer. It moves to design and build, then to the operational phase where value is extracted. Finally, it ends with disposal. Note the potential loop back to planning. Lessons learned from disposal often inform how we plan for new data. Now we reach the heart of the matter, data classification. This is the process of categorizing data based on its value and sensitivity. Why do we do this? Because protecting all data at the highest level is prohibitively expensive and inefficient. You don't put a bank vault door on the cafeteria. Classification allows us to focus our limited security budget on the data that matters most. The absolute prerequisite here is ownership. You must identify a data owner first, because only the owner has the authority to decide the classification. Once classified, the label dictates the controls. This logic flow shows the classification process. We start with a data asset. The immediate first step is to identify the owner. The owner then assesses two things: sensitivity and value. These inputs combine to determine the classification label, the green box. Once labeled, the system automatically knows which security controls to apply. It is a logical, step-by-step derivation of control requirements. What do these labels look like? In a commercial environment, we typically see a 4-level model. Public data requires no protection. Think marketing brochures. Internal data is for your eyes only as an employee, like a phone directory. Confidential data, like customer lists, requires authorization. Finally, restricted, or sometimes secret, is for the crown jewels: financial records, passwords, and trade secrets. This level requires the highest controls, often involving encryption and senior management approval for access. Military models use top secret and secret, but the principle is identical. The label drives the behavior. Visualize classification as a pyramid. At the wide base, we have public data, low risk, high volume. As we move up to internal and confidential, the volume of data decreases, but the risk increases. At the very peak is restricted data. This is the smallest subset of data, but carries the highest risk and requires the most expensive controls. We focus our resources on the top of the pyramid. Governance fails without defined roles. We have three primary players. First, the data owner. This is a business executive, not an IT person. They assume responsibility for the content, and, crucially, they decide the classification level. Second, the data custodian. This is usually IT. They don't decide the value. They just implement the controls the owner asked for, like backups and encryption. Third, the data user. This is anyone who accesses the data. Their job is simply to follow the rules set by the owner. If a user mishandles data, it's a governance failure. If IT fails to back it up, it's a custodian failure. This sequence shows the interaction. The data owner starts the chain by defining classification and controls for the custodian. The custodian sets up the system. The user must request access, which the owner authorizes. Only then does the user access the data, facilitated by the custodian system. Note that the owner is the decision maker, the custodian is the implementer, and the user is the consumer. Classification is useless if people don't know what to do with the label. We need data handling guidelines. These rules tell us how to store, transmit, and destroy data based on its tag. For example, restricted. Data might require encryption at rest and may be absolutely banned from mobile devices. When transmitting, confidential, data might need email encryption, while public, data does not. For destruction, simple deletion isn't enough for high-value data. We might mandate cross-cut shredding for paper or degaussing for hard drives. These rules must be explicit and documented. This diagram contrasts the handling of restricted versus public data. For restricted data, in red, every step storage, transfer, destruction requires high-effort security controls, like encryption and physical destruction. For public data, in green, the path is open storage, clear text transfer, and simple recycling. This visualizes why we classify, to avoid applying expensive, red, controls to green, data. Data governance is heavily driven by privacy regulations like GDPR and HIPAA. You must understand three key roles. The data subject is the human being. The data controller is your organization deciding to collect data. The data processor might be your cloud provider doing the work. Governance requires you to manage these relationships explicitly. You need consent from the subject and must provide privacy notices. Before starting new projects, you must conduct a Privacy Impact Assessment, PIA, to find risks. Also, be very careful with offshore data storage. Privacy laws often restrict cross-border data flows. This diagram maps the privacy relationships. The data subject gives consent to the data controller. The controller provides a privacy notice back to the subject. The controller then sends instructions to the data processor. The processor acts upon the PII database. In a governance audit, we verify that every arrow in this diagram is documented and legally compliant. Finally, how do we audit this? As an IS auditor, your objective is to ensure the framework aligns with strategy. Your first test is ownership. Does every dataset have an identified owner? If not, classification is impossible. Second, review the classification itself. Is it accurate? Third, test the controls. Does restricted data actually force encryption, or is it just a paper policy? Finally, review the privacy impact assessments to ensure privacy risks are actually being caught. Your final report provides assurance that the organization's data is not just managed, but truly governed. This is your audit decision tree. Start by checking ownership. If no owner, stop there. It's a finding of lack of accountability. If yes, check classification. Is it correct? If no, it's an improper risk rating. If yes, check the controls against the label. Do they match? If not, it's a control failure. Only when you pass all three gates can you provide assurance.